All right, we are live. We have go ahead and open this public hearing. And just want to make note that Dan Thomas is recusing himself from this meeting. I'll ask him to come back in as soon as. Sounds good. All right, make note that Mr. Thomas has left the room. Beth?
Thank you, Chairman. This is for R24-10-1. I'm going to start out by reading the request. The applicant, Healthy Farms J&R LLC, is requesting the original zoning of a 366-acre property located at 3645 Russellville Road in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The property is at the southwest corner of the intersection of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Way and Russellville Road, US Highway 68 East. The property is identified as parcel ID number 13900000004.00 in the Office of the Property Evaluation Administrator. The property is currently unzoned. The applicant is requesting that a 111-acre portion of the property be zoned I-1 Light Industrial District, a 241-acre portion of property to be zoned AT1 Agricultural Transitional District, and a 14-acre portion of the property to be zoned B4 Arterial Commercial District. The applicant has provided an exhibit, which is on the screen right there, and is also available for inspection at the Office of CDS. Just real quickly, I'm just going to show you some, of course, this is the exhibit, like I said, but I'm going to show you a few pictures of the property. It's agricultural, so it looks mostly the same. The first picture here is on the the side nearest the airport, and as you can see, the zoning is I-1 is the proposal. And this is just going on down the property at I-1. This is more in the middle of the property, and this will be the proposal of AT1. More of the same. And this is at the intersection of Martin Luther King and Russellville Road. It's on one side of it. It's on Russellville Road. And this is on the Martin Luther King Jr. On page 7 of your staff report, I've provided, department head comments. The ones that are written on here have had no concerns. I do want to point out that the Kentucky Airport Commission, Zoning Commission commented, and I believe those were handed out to you guys. In essence, it's just normally they do not comment on zoning, but since this is in close proximity to the airport, they just stated the verbiage that construction of buildings on this property will require approval from Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission, which is already the case without zoning. And they may be subject to location and height restrictions. Also in your packet, please note the letter from the county judge executive concerning the airport concerns as well. And then I did talk to Chris Brown from Fort Campbell today, and he had no concerns.
Okay.
On staff review, in cases of original zoning, emphasis is placed on conformance with the comprehensive plan and with existing and anticipated development trends. The future land use map depicts this property as agricultural with transitional, residential, commercial, and mixed use overlays. So I'm going to go through the conformity with the comprehensive plan by each proposed zoning district. I'm going to start with the I-1, the light industrial district. The 111 acres abuts an already existing I-1 district, and the request is consistent with the adjacent use of property and the depiction of the future land use map. This portion of property has direct access onto a minor arterial roadway and is sufficiently sized to accommodate light industrial use. The AT1 Agricultural Transitional District, I'm going to read a small of the intent of this district since this is a newer zoning district. But the intent of this district is to promote the continued use of property for agricultural purposes while providing the opportunity for lower intensity or larger lot residential and non-residential development. The intent of this district is ideal for large agricultural properties. Also, the designation of this property as agricultural transitional aligns with the depiction of the future land use map. Finally, the B4 Arterial Commercial District. According to the future land use map, the corner of the affected property at the intersection of Russellville Road and Martin Luther King Jr. Way is depicted as commercial. So this portion of the applicant's tract has access to major arterials and a minor arterial roadway, which is conducive to the B4 designation. On compatibility with existing zoning patterns and development trends, and some of this is redundant, but the proposed I-1 designation portion of the property is abutted to an existing I-1 district. The proposal of the AT1 designation is alignment with existing development trends on the affected property and properties in the general vicinity. And finally, the proposed B4 designation is compatible with existing zoning patterns and aligns with the future land use map. Finally, the staff feels that the proposal does not constitute spot zoning. It is consistent with development trends in the area, and the affected property is sufficiently sized to accommodate future use. Therefore, the staff believes that per the application, this request meets requirements per KRS to justify the proposed zonings. However, the recommendation is based on the review of the application only and has not considered testimony that may be forthcoming at this public hearing. I know the applicant is here and there are others here as well that might wish to speak concerning this request. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you, Beth. Does any board members have any questions for Beth? All right, thank you, Beth. If there's anyone in the audience that has any comments that they would like to make, please step up to the podium. Please give your name and your address, and we will go from there.
Okay, good evening. Y'all hear me? Sufficient. Better? Maybe? Okay. So first off, my name is John Helsley, okay, born and raised here in Hopkinsville. I'm a practicing optometrist for the last 30 years here. For most of the property in question, my family's owned this land since the 40s. The tract that's proposed to be zone AT1 and B4, that was bought by my grandfather back in the 40s, and the other piece was bought by my father in the 80s. So we've had it in our family for a long time. We farmed it, and we really intend to continue to do that. So before getting ahead of myself, I'm going to speak in favor of the proposal. I wanted to thank you guys and gals for putting up with us, talking to you about it. And also I want to thank the CDS staff, specifically Tom Britton and Beth Richardson. I'll go through a little bit of that, but I think maybe one of the most important things that I can communicate, not only to you all, but to my neighbors, who some I've spoken to and some not, is we have no deals or pending deals for the parcel in question right now, okay? Anytime you go through change, there's always rumors and fears, but we have none of that right now, and we plan to continue to operate that as a family farm as we have since we've owned it. A little background for not so much you guys, but folks that might not have followed this process the same way that we have is, as you all know, that piece of property and a lot of other agricultural tracts anyway within the city limits are not currently zoned. And a year ago, we got a letter from the Planning Commission. And it's actually in the proposal that we submitted. But my paraphrase is that we want to zone this property because we've had other problems within the city limits. That hopefully that's a fair summary of that letter. So that's really sort of what started the whole ball rolling as far as, why does this need to be zoned and why is it now? Pretty quickly after that, I met with Tom and Beth because I was concerned about, what's this process going to be and, why and all that. And they explained it to me. And then, they told me what their concerns were and vice versa. And they've really worked well with us, from a governmental to a private entity deal. I felt like that's been really good. During that time, I also met with a couple of real estate folks to determine what is the best path forward from a zoning standpoint. That's basically how we came up with this, split zoning that is in that proposal. And I guess, just to hear it from me, there's 3 different proposed zoning districts there. The I-1, our thought process was, well, it's right next to the I-1 property there where the airport is, and really felt like since that was going to be similar, that hopefully that would allay any concerns that our neighbors to the west would have, since there's no change there from what's already around the airport. The AT1 that was a bigger tract of farmland, and that's why you guys and gals came up with those designations of the AT1 and 2. And then obviously there at the corner, B4 being commercial, it makes sense there at the intersection. I guess just to reiterate, this is a proactive request by us as landowners at the prompting of the Planning Commission. Being from here, we all know that Hopkinsville is changing, okay? We think this proposal strikes a good balance between retaining it as an existing farm, which again is our plan, but also realizing there is future growth there potentially. Other thing, I did reach out to some, not all, but some of our neighbors to try and give them some background, because again, when you see the signs go up around the piece of property, you see it in the newspaper, and everybody gets really worried about what's going on right next to me. So I have tried to reach out to some of those folks. Some of those are here tonight, but the communication I think is always good. So those are my remarks for that. I don't know if it's appropriate right now, but if it is, fine. But if y'all have any questions for me, or y'all have any questions for me, I'll be right back here. So.
Does anyone have any questions for John, since he is the applicant?
Chair, I don't have a question. I've got a comment.
Mr. Fleming?
I'm very familiar with the road and the area, and most of us are. If I owned that piece of property, I'd be doing the same thing you're trying to do, just to get it zoned where in the future I could do something with it. I do know that anytime you make zoned pieces of property, there's some things that you got to walk through to get where you want to be. And I don't think in time you'll be where you want to be, but with understanding there's other folks out there, and at the airport, for instance, I understand they're having some questions, and I understand their side of it. So in time, it will all, I think, work out where it pleases everybody and give you that opportunity to put that on the market somewhere down the road. It may be 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, but it needs to be location. I've had a location like that on 41A out there years ago. And hoping one day they'll finish that bypass to connect all the way around that sector, which will make things much better for all of us in the community when they do. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Helsley? All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments from the audience? Just please state your name and your address when you step up to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's James Adams. Most of you know me, but I'm the attorney for the airport board, for the Hopkinsville Christian County Airport Board. And just to give you all some background, the airport is obviously adjacent to this property proposed to be zoned. And I only learned of that within the past 10 days. So our board met 2 weeks ago, and it was not something that we've had the opportunity to discuss and deliberate on as our board. But in just learning this, I do have our engineer, Mr. Ronnie Canups, with us. That he's knows more about the ins and outs of how this zoning request may affect the airport. But ultimately, what we'd like to see and what our request will be that this board table this and send this back to plan review, so our board can more fully weigh in and offer our comments on how this zoning change would impact the airport. And of course, the airport's very important to all of us as this community expands. And what we're going to just offer you folks tonight is a little bit how our expansion plans will be moving forward. So turn it over.
Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Ronnie Canups. As he said, I'm the consultant engineer for the airport. From the engineering perspective, I have a handout. I could put it on the slide, but I'm not sure the easiest way to do that. I don't know that I have enough real quick.
Yeah, does this, one of the other slides show the airport in the map?
Does it?
Maybe not, I thought I seen it in. I think it does.
Even if there's just a basic picture of it, it would be.
I think there is one, Beth, the very first picture that you had.
It may show more or less.
Right there.
Okay, what he's passing out, the major concern, particularly for the I-1 section that's the requested zoning, is the airport has what are referred to as preferred approaches off of both runway ends, or preferred approaches. It's kind of a misnomer, because preferred is not just where the pilots would like to land. It has to do with the directions of the wind speed and everything. And the preferred approach for the Hopkinsville Christian County Airport is flying over that I-1 section. And in order to maintain their approaches as they are, there's a particular glide path that has to be met and stay clear. What you're seeing with that handout is, if you see the blue dashed lines where they're going out just right off the end of the runway, that is the approach path that the FAA would require us to keep clear up to a certain height in order for them to maintain those approaches. And if anything gets on those approaches, there's a very good chance that those approaches could go away. And then later I'll let some of the pilots speak why that's a bad idea. So the biggest, and if you look on there, you'll see the contours. The problem is right off the end of the runway, there's a hill, and it's like 30 feet high. So you already have the problem with the earth itself. So something being built there, or what would be built there, would be the question, and how would it impact the airport? So the biggest question is, what is it going to do to the approaches for the airport? And then again, at the same time, as you can see with that, if you move that approach, the further you move that approach out, the more restrictive the heights become. So if certain things were to be built in that particular area, you could potentially, there's no plan right now to extend the runway, but you are landlocked in the airport to where you would not be able to extend the runway short of starting to knock things down if things were built in the way. And I mean, I was out there last week. You have all kinds of industry planes flying in and out of there right now. I mean, there were all kinds of very large jets, and it's driving industry in the county. I mean, I was here for a presentation just a few weeks ago, and Billy was explaining that all of the things that are just happening out there. So the concern from the engineering perspective, like I said, is protecting the approaches, particularly on that end as the preferred runway end. And then I will let one of the pilots speak about the importance of the approaches just from a pilot's perspective. Sure.
Just please state your name, if you don't mind.
My name's CJ Darty, 122 Forbes Drive here in town. I fly for a local company here, and what he's talking about at the approaches is if you look at the west side, obviously you've got town there. We're limited by our approach there to only getting down to about 500 feet above the ground, which sounds great, but if you've got fog or heavy rain or stuff like that, that's not very good, as well as you can't land from the west at night at all. So our only approach at night is from the east. That lets us get down to 250 feet, which is much better. With that runway protected zone, that slope that he's talking about, that's what allows that. That I-1, as I understand it, that lets you build up to 60 foot. But within that I-1, with our runway protected zone, you can only build up to maybe 30 foot, and in some areas 10 foot, or you interrupt that. And if that gets interrupted, the FAA will take away that approach and make it go higher. And when that happens, A, it bothers me because I can't get home. So that's a bummer. But B, industry will be flying into Clarksville, Madisonville, other places like that, as opposed to here. And if you're already a company of the caliber that's flying places for industry, why would I build my place in Hopkinsville if I'm going to have to be flying into Clarksville or Madisonville? I'll just build it there instead, you know. But anyway, it's kind of a safety issue is why that slope is important. I don't think we're opposed to the zoning. We just didn't have any time to have any input into how it would impact us and how it would impact the county, really. Zoning's not a bad thing. It's just we'd like to have some time to put some input in.
Okay, understood. Thank you for your comments. See anyone else have any other comments?
Are there any questions for their?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Adams? Board members have any questions for Mr. Adams? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just again, John, just give your name.
Sure. John Helsley, my address, which I left out before, 310 James Lynn Drive. I guess two things that I just wanted to mention, because I didn't see a copy of what they handed out to you guys. But number one, when we were going through this process, we followed the process per the regulations of when we submit and all that. So I don't want anybody thinking that we tried to do something behind anybody's back, okay? And the last thing that I want, being from here, we don't want to do anything that's going to negatively affect Hopkinsville. And frankly, that's why we're doing the zoning, okay? And again, I get it, and I understand about the expansion and that type of thing, but is there any, I mean, I guess my question, you know, if there's an opposition to the zoning to I-1, that was it's a little hard for me to understand, since that's exactly the same zoning that surrounds the airport right now. That would be my question with that, especially if, you know, nothing has changed the way it is. And, you know, with the approaches, I'm not a pilot, far from it, but, and I understand those glide curves or glide scales or whatever, but that gets into a conversation as much about air rights as it does zoning. I mean, you guys are the zoning, you know, commission. And depending on where that glide scale is, depends on, how much height is needed and, but it's related, but from my research, it's a separate issue from the zoning. So I just. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for James or the engineer. Did I understand you to say that the approach path, only the I-1 parcel, 111 acres, I think, in the I-1 parcel is affecting the approach? What's being proposed as an agriculture zone does not affect it?
There's a
And-
portion
and-
of it.
Sorry to interrupt. If you can, just give your name
I'm sorry,
again.
Ronnie Knupfs again. I'm the engineer for the airport. There's a portion of it that does. Our concern mostly would be, we realize that you could put grain silos or something if it's agricultural, but the likelihood of having tall structures is much lower if it's agricultural versus industrial. And so like with the compatible land use, yes, the airport zoned I-1, but clearly we're not going to put we're not allowed by federal regulation to put a structure in that's going to cause a problem for the airport. So I understand exactly why this particular zoning was selected. I told them that if I had a Sharpie and I had a highlighter trying to keep everything contiguous, I would have done the same thing if I did not have the experience that I have, doing airport engineering for the last 15 years. So I understand exactly why it looks like it looks. But like I said, the biggest concern is, building heights in that particular area and the likelihood of having tall buildings for particular zonings, because that's the tall structures are what's going to be a concern to the airport.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments or concerns, questions, comments?
Someone on behalf of the airport, James, maybe you want to address Dr. Helsley's question about air rights.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Would you, would you want to address Dr. Helsley's point concerning the acquisition of air rights as opposed to the zoning process?
I think I understand the question, that separate air rights are separate from zoning, and you want me to speak on that.
He raised the question. I
Sure,
just
I-
want to give you an opportunity to respond.
Sure. There's certainly a process for the airport to look into acquiring specific air rights, but I do think the zoning will impact that process. For example, there's old Kentucky court decisions that say you're more limited in what you can acquire in terms of air rights over ag land. Ag land is more protected. So I think from our standpoint that an agricultural type zoning and use would jive if in the airport board deemed it prudent and worthwhile to consider acquiring specific navigation easement air rights that would secure that property. And probably a time when that would happen would certainly occur if the airport is expanded to the east as is proposed. That expansion's been contemplated, but we're not there yet. So I hope that can
Yep.
answer the question. They are distinct, but there are some overlaps in how that process would work.
Okay, thank
Are
you.
there any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes,
James,
David.
if you don't mind. Air rights. Do y'all have funds available to buy air rights today? I know Fort Campbell buys them. They're actually coming out further this way to buy air rights, even down towards Orange Springs. I didn't know if y'all did.
We do have funds, and now in terms to buy them, that's a more complicated question. We don't have any specific grant at the moment. We have acquired air rights on the west side. That's been the focus of the past couple of years, coming over on the city side approach. And we are in the process of wrapping up some easement acquisition on that side of the approach.
Good.
All right. Anybody have any other questions for James? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Any other comments in the crowd? Okay. Seeing none,
Let's, what were you getting ready to do?
continue.
Let's talk about options. As I understand, the airport council's representation was to the board, it was a need for time to examine this and be able to respond. The CDS Commission wants to be mindful of giving all affected parties an opportunity to fairly be heard. There is, am I correct, Tom, a 60-day clock ticking. So there's not an inexhaustible amount of time before this board needs to act on this application for original zoning.
Can I stop you before you go too far and I forget my question? What, the 60-day clock that's ticking, that's our internal clock?
It's an ordinance that's by the city. From, you have to respond, Mr. Garnet, from the time you act, which to me would be the plan review committee action. That's the first time you acknowledge receipt.
When did?
Yes, sir. There were two provisions that affect timing. One is in KRS 100. The city ordinance, which was adopted, chapter 158, also codifies that and provides that basically the planning commission has a 60-day window to consider an application upon receipt. From talking with Mr. Underwood, that clock would have started ticking with this delivery to plan review committee back 10 days ago.
Correct.
So it wouldn't be expired before our
Next
November
meeting,
board
that's-
meeting?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Tom and Steve.
Sure. So that's what want to make sure you're aware of, that it's not just a bottomless pit of time. So the applicant has the right to have action taken within the 60-day period. If you don't need any further testimony, then the chair can close the hearing and it's on your agenda for action tonight. If you are inclined or want to grant some additional time as requested by the airport board as an adjoining property owner, to give them the opportunity to have some dialogue, as I understood the presentation, then the chair could consider making this a continuation hearing, and the hearing would simply recess, then the hearing would reconvene at a date, time certain in the future within the 60 days. Correct, Mr. Bredden?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So our next board meeting is November the 25th at 6 PM. I would like to continue this, continuation of this meeting, not close this public hearing. Pardon me. And continue this hearing until November the 25th at 6 PM. Okay. At that time, the board will make a decision. And hopefully that'll allow the airport board to additional information and time to gather to provide to this board to make a final determination on this zoning request.
But the anticipation is that this would be acted on at the conclusion of the continuation hearing. At that time, it would be back on the agenda, and then it would be acted on because of the applicant's rights to have action taken within 60 days. If that's the discretion of the chair to call this a continuation hearing. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that mean that it's going to planning review first and then back on the,
No, ma'am, I hadn't anticipated that.
okay,
The plan review had met and considered it. But it allows an opportunity consistent with what you've heard tonight at the public hearing, to have that discussion and dialogue. I understand that. But that's your discretion. If you feel strongly that the chair should close the hearing and it should be acted on tonight, one of my concerns is you close the hearing, you got to go through re-advertisement. You've got hearing A and then you've got hearing B. And I think it's cleaner to keep the record, if that's your pleasure, as a continuation hearing to a day, time, and certain.
The chair doesn't need a motion for that to happen. He can call for that continuation,
Yeah,
correct?
this meeting's not open yet,
You're
so.
not in a, you're
We're
not in a
the
regular meeting.
so-
The other option, of course, also
Support that.
too, is that the chair could declare it's a continuation. When this matter comes up on your regular agenda, then you can have it, take your formal action to table it at that point to that date for final action within the 60-day period. And if that's, I think that's being responsive to what you've heard tonight.
Well, there's given consideration to both parties, Mr. Helsley and as well as the adjoining property owners. Just to be fair, I feel like that's fair enough. Mr. Adams indicated there was 10 days. He only had 10 days to respond and board meetings overlapped. I feel as though that, this is a big decision, for all parties involved and even this board. So I think I would like to hear what the airport has to say once we come back on the 25th, and we will make a decision at that time for sure, Mr. Helsley.
Now, if that's going to be the action and we table on the agenda, let me just make sure that board members know, and I'm sure council will know, everyone will understand, we would ask you to not have any ex parte contact with members of CDS. If you have questions of staff, you have information you want to request, that's fine. But I would ask board members not to entertain any ex parte contact outside of this convened meeting. That's ex parte contact. And I know that maybe puts you in a difficult position because you have friends, you see people, you know people, you go to church, you see them in the grocery. If someone may initiate a contact with you, that doesn't mean that they're trying to bias you in some way. It may be something on their mind and they want to talk to you. The difficulty of that is that leads to you potentially being disqualified from acting. So I would just ask, let's everyone have, you're going to have a continuation public hearing. Any and all that wants to be presented at that time on the record can be, but I would ask you not to, people that are interested in this, or you have it on your mind, or you're concerned about it, if you would either contact staff or you're welcome to contact me. And I'll be glad to communicate with you, but I'd ask you not, in fairness to the applicant and to the adjoining property owners, not to have communication with board members until we're reconvened.
Mr. Underwood, I have a question and a statement. Is that, from where I sit, I represent the constituents of the county.
I understand.
So can you not talk to people? I mean, you're
Take it to-
advising not to, but is it illegal to? Because from a representation perspective,
I'll tell you the best practice is you're going to act on what comes into the record. You've heard part of the record tonight. At your next meeting, the record will be open. You'll have a continuation of that hearing. This board acts based upon the record that's before them. And Mr. Arnott, my concern is that someone inadvertently might think that in discussing with you that they understood you to have made a commitment. So you didn't. But someone walks away from that conversation and says, well, I know what Brandon Garnett's going to do because this is what he told me. What I'm advising is to protect you, board members, applicant, adjoining property owners, anyone who has an interest in this particular original zoning request, to simply refrain from communication with board members. And if you have questions, concerns, something you want to ask, staff is readily available. I appreciate the kind words of Dr. Helsley about staff being responsive and helpful. I'm sure Mr. Adams' board, they'll be equally responsive to any information that you might request. If you have questions concerning procedure or anything connected to that, board members, of course, welcome and encouraged to contact me. The public, if they have any questions or concerns, or if you get contacted, send them to me, depending on the nature of the inquiry, or send them to Tom. And so that you're advised, I keep a log of any outside contact that comes in while we talked about. So everyone can remember the conversation the same way. after it's over with. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you. Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so since we're going to continue this meeting, this public hearing on November the 25th at 6 PM, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order with a roll call.
Ron Adams,
Present.
Jack Elliott.
Yes.
Rachel Smith,
Here.
David Brain.
Here.
Ben Bollinger,
Here.
Leon Oldham, Brandon Garnett,
Here.
Michael Kanzler,
Here.
Jim Fleming,
Here.
Dan Thomas, Kylie Killebrew,
Here.
and Glenda Motley.
Here.
Dan can come back in unless you're going to go out of order, Mr. Chairman. If you're going to take up under new business item A, he can remain out and then come back in, or if he can come in,
Let's go ahead and go out of order.
All right.
That would be the easiest thing to do.
we'll entertain a motion then to go out of order and let item 6A, new business, original zoning, Helsley Farms, let that be taken up next. Dan, can we ask you to hold for a minute, please? I'm sorry.
As soon as we cover this, we'll have you come back in, Dan. Sorry.
Kick him out.
Okay, item number,
Let's get a motion to go out of order, please.
yep,
Motion to move out of order.
motion's been made by
Second.
Ms. Motley. Second by Rachel Smith. Any discussion? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Under new item of business, AR-24-10-1, original zoning, Russellville Road. Just need a motion to table that.
I would make and you can correct me if this motion's wrong, Mr. Underwood, but I make a motion to continue the public hearing and table the final action to November 25th at 6 PM.
I'm going to say that you're ratifying the action by the chair to continue, for continuation of the hearing.
Okay,
That's fine.
that's
I'm
good.
trying to parse words, but I want to
Okay.
stay clean.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made by Mr. Garnett and second by Mr. Brame. Any discussion? All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So that matter is tabled to a day and time certain.
Yeah, make the record that Mr. Thomas is entering the room for the meeting.
You're down to minutes approval, I believe.
Next item of business, approval of minutes. I've got September 23rd, 2024.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for those dates and dispense reading.
Motion has
Second.
been made by Mr. Fleming, second by Ms. Motley. Any discussion? All in favor by saying aye. Motion carries. Mr. Garnett?
Mr. Chairman, the Financial Review Committee has met and brings forth a favorable recommendation for the September 2024 financials.
Thank you. Motion has been made by Mr. Garnett for the approval of September 2024 financials, second by Mr. Kanzler. Any discussion? All in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Tom, any old business? Okay. New business. We have resolution under item B, resolution 2024.
As you well know, we are continuing our zoning of the western area, and we have been in contact with landowners of some larger agricultural lots in the area to inform them of the AT1, AT2 districts. Attached to your staff report is a resolution to start the process on the first one that we're going to do, which is the Robert Meacham properties. You can see on the overhead with the proposal of AT1. Please remember, the resolution does not predetermine or restrain zoning recommendations. This is just to start the process of notification and public hearing. So we'll need a motion to authorize the chairman to sign the resolution so we can start process. And I believe it's because of time constraints, it's going to be December. It will be on December.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Thomas, second by Ms. Kylie Killebrew. Any discussion? All in favor of saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Tom, any other business? Okay. Admin reports.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, we have provided you with a copy of our administrative report for the month of October. I try to keep this on 2 pages. Unfortunately, it slipped to 3 pages for this month. Staff has been extremely busy. I won't go over all these points, but just wanted to highlight a couple. Taisha Walton has rejoined our staff as of October the 21st. We're happy to have Taisha back. And my hope is over the next 30 days, we'll have all of our open planning positions filled. But I will provide you with additional information as we
Good
have it.
news.
Under long-range planning, council did finalize all major lane zoning that was recommended by the commission back a few months ago. Medical cannabis for the city of Hopkinsville has had first reading. There was a modification on distance separation, but we anticipate second reading here in about a week. On the topic of medical cannabis, Pembroke City Commission did pass first reading of their ordinance on medical cannabis, which was consistent with the recommendation of the commission. And I anticipate in November, we will have a public hearing for Oak Grove. Their council has asked that we hold public hearing for an amendment to their zoning text on medical cannabis. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we will have the medical cannabis issue out of our hands. Oak Grove, also, we anticipate having subdivision guidelines or regulations for your consideration for the month of November. Under the building department, several permits issued this month. Did want to point out almost $24 million in total construction or new construction permitted in the month of October. On the community development report or side, just point out a couple of items. We have sent out and published a request for qualifications for a West 7th Street redevelopment plan. That was funded through Legacy Hopkinsville as part of this budgetary cycle. So we're looking forward to that, and hopefully that will tie into some things we're looking to do on the zoning end. Property management, we've sent out an RFP for proposals on property management services. As I've reported to the commission, we are trying to get out of the property management business. For several of the properties we have managed previously for Local Development Corporation as well as Community Housing Development Organization. We will keep you posted as that progresses. E911 GIS, one of the major projects we completed this month, and this was for the county as well as Pennyroyal Area Development District, is the collection of street data, primarily centerline slopes, roadway hazards for a safety plan the state is in the process putting together. And in total, I think we collected about 171 miles of data that we have transmitted to the pad in the state. Mr. Chairman, that's just a quick highlight of some of the things we have done in the month of October. If any commissioners have any questions of staff, be happy to answer them.
Tom, I want to commend you and your staff for doing an excellent job here. Looks like you said you had 67 permits were issued thus far in October with 24 million, plus many other items on this administrative report. You all do, you and your staff do a great job and overworked, and hey, we really appreciate it. Make our job easy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He stopped short of saying you're underpaid. He said you're overworked. You heard that, right?
I call
Well, I
that.
choose my words wisely. That's it.
I understand.
Thanks, Tom. Does anyone, commissioners, have any questions, comments? All right.
Glad to see Mr. Adams.
Motion to adjourn.
Ms. Motley has made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Ms. Rachel Smith. All in favor of saying aye. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.